Bible study. This is the Feast of Purim. So I have these questions on the board here. When we're done with the reading, we can talk about these things. Major impressions from Esther, things we learned from Esther, just the character sketches, the people that we met in Esther. What we learn about those that relate to us in any way. Challenging things about studying Esther, encouraging things about Esther. What's the Holy Spirit saying to the churches through Esther? There's our Revelation question. And anything else you want to talk about. So I have those questions up here now, so we can think of those big picture things, and then we'll get into the reading here, and maybe they'll come up as we go. So traditionally, I would be reading this in Hebrew. There are two problems with that. One is I can't read very much Hebrew, and I would imagine you probably don't understand much more Hebrew than I can read. So we're just going to read it in English today. I'm working with the NIV 1984. It's what I have on my computer. If you want to get the Pew Bible, that'll be a close match. When we get to Mordecai, we will cheer, you will cheer, and do whatever instruments or noisemakers you have. And then when we ever get to Haman, you will boo and use whatever noisemakers you have for that. If we have to stop and regain our composure, that's okay. I was talking to Steve beforehand. The tone of this will be a little bit slapstick, and that's kind of the tone of the book of Esther. We've seen that already. So if you don't smile, something's wrong with you. At the end, both Karen and Tammy have made some of the Hamantashen for us, the Haman's Pockets, and those are out on the table in the narthex. I can't convey those through Facebook to you all at home, but we'll do what we can. Speaking of Facebook, I've got the Revelation study on YouTube now, and that is linked to our church's Facebook page if you want to go back and watch highlights, or if you have a hard time sleeping at night, something like that. So, Esther chapter 1, you've got your noisemakers ready to go, and we'll go through it together. Now, there'll be a kind of a lull at the beginning here. Chapter 1 doesn't have much action, but don't worry. By the time we get to chapter 3, you'll be rocking and rolling. It'll be a good thing. Here we go, the Scroll of Esther. This is what happened during the time of Xerxes, the Xerxes who ruled over 127 provinces, stretching from India to Kush. At that time, King Xerxes reigned from his royal throne in the citadel of Susa, and in the third year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all his nobles and officials. The military leaders of Persia and Media, the princes and the nobles of the provinces were present. For a full 180 days, he displayed the vast wealth of his kingdom and the splendor and glory of his majesty. When these days were over, the king gave a banquet lasting 7 days in the enclosed garden of the king's palace for all the people from the least to the greatest who were in the citadel of Susa. The garden had hangings of white and blue linen, fastened with cords of white linen and purple material to silver rings on marble pillars. There were couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and other costly stones. Wine was served in goblets of gold, each one different from the other, and the royal wine was abundant in keeping with the king's liberality. By the king's command, each guest was allowed to drink in his own way, for the king instructed all the wine stewards to serve each man what he wished. We will not be observing that portion of the book today. Verse 9, Queen Vashti also gave a banquet for the women in the royal palace of King Xerxes. On the 7th day, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine, he commanded the 7 eunuchs who served him, Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcass, to bring before him Queen Vashti, wearing her royal crown, in order to display her beauty to the people and nobles, for she was lovely to look at. But when the attendants delivered the king's command, Queen Vashti refused to come. Then the king became furious and burned with anger. Since it was customary for the king to consult experts in matters of law and justice, he spoke with the wise men who understood the times and were closest to the king, Karshina, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsina, and Mimikan, the 7 nobles of Persia and Media, who had special access to the king and were highest in the kingdom. According to law, what must be done to Queen Vashti, he asked. She has not obeyed the command of King Xerxes that the eunuchs have taken to her. Then Mimikan replied in the presence of the king and the nobles, Queen Vashti has done wrong, not only against the king, but also against all the nobles and the peoples of all the provinces of King Xerxes. For the queen's conduct will become known to all the women, and so they will despise their husbands and say, King Xerxes commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, but she would not come. This very day, the Persian and Median women of nobility who have heard about the queen's conduct will respond to all the king's nobles in the same way. There will be no end of disrespect and discord. Therefore, if it pleases the king, let him issue a royal decree, and let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media, which cannot be repealed, that Vashti is never again to enter the presence of King Xerxes. Also let the king give her royal position to someone else who is better than she. Then when the king's edict is proclaimed throughout all her vast realm, all the women will respect their husbands, from the least to the greatest. The king and his nobles were pleased with this advice, so the king did as Memucan proposed. He sent dispatches to all parts of the kingdom, to each province in its own script, and to each people in its own language, proclaiming in each people's tongue that every man should be ruler over his own household. Chapter 2. Later, when the anger of King Xerxes had subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what he had decreed about her. Then the king's personal attendants proposed, let a search be made for beautiful young virgins for the king. Let the king appoint commissioners in every province of his realm to bring all these beautiful girls into the harem at the citadel of Susa. Let them be placed under the care of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women, and let beauty treatments be given to them. Then let the girl who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. This advice pleased the king, and he followed it. Now there was in the citadel of Susa a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin named Mordecai. It'll get better. The son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, who had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, among those taken captive with Jehoiakim, the king of Judah. Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, whom he had brought up because she had neither father nor mother. This girl, who was also known as Esther, was lovely in form and features, and Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother died. When the king's order and edict had been proclaimed, many girls were brought to the citadel of Susa and put under the care of Haggai. Esther was also taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Haggai, who had charge of the harem. The girl pleased him and won his favor. Immediately he provided her with beauty treatments and special food. He assigned to her 7 maids and selected from the king's palace and moved her and her maids into the best place in the harem. Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background because Mordecai had forbidden her to do so. Now we're getting to the spirit here. This is good. Every day he walked back and forth near the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther was and what was happening to her. Before a girl's turn came to go into King Xerxes, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatments prescribed for the women, 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 with perfumes and cosmetics. And this is how she would go to the king. Anything she wanted was given to her to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. In the evening she would go there, in the morning return to another part of the harem, to the care of Shashgaz, the king's eunuch who was in charge of the concubines. She would not return to the king unless he was pleased with her and summoned her by name. When the turn came for Esther, the girl Mordecai had adopted, the daughter of his uncle Abihail, to go to the king, she asked for nothing other than what Haggai, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the harem, suggested. And Esther won the favor of everyone who saw her. She was taken to King Xerxes in the royal residence in the 10th month, the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. Now the king was attracted to Esther more than any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his nobles and officials. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts with royal liberality. When the virgins were assembled a second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. But Esther had kept her secret, her family background and nationality, just as Mordecai had told her to do. For she continued to follow Mordecai's instructions as she had done when he was bringing her up. During the time Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthana and Teresh, 2 of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, became angry and conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. But Mordecai found out about the plot and told Queen Esther, who in turn reported it to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. And when the report was investigated and found to be true, the 2 officials were hanged on a gallows. All this was recorded in the book of the annals in the presence of the king. Chapter 3 will be a lot of fun. Here we go. After these events, King Xerxes honored Haman. the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, elevating him and giving him a seat of honor higher than that of all the other nobles. All the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman, for the king had commanded this concerning him. But Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor. Then the royal officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, "Why do you disobey the king's command?" Day after day they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. Therefore they told Haman about it to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated, for he had told them that he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai I knew it was coming, it's still funny, would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Yet having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. In the 12th year of King Xerxes, in the first month, the month of Nisan, they cast the pur, that is the lot, in the presence of Haman to select a day and month. And the lot fell on the 12th month, the month of Adar. Then Haman said to King Xerxes, "There is a certain people dispersed and scattered among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom, whose customs are different from those of all the other people, and who do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will put 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasury for the men who carry out this business." So the king took its signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. "Keep the money," the king said to Haman, "and do with the people as you please." Then on the 13th day of the first month, the royal secretaries were summoned. They wrote out in the script of each province, in the language of each people, all Haman's orders to the king's satraps, the governors of the various provinces, and the nobles of the various peoples. These are written in the name of King Xerxes himself and sealed with his own ring. Dispatches were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with the order to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and little children, on a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so they will be ready for that day. Spurred on by the king's command, the couriers went out, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was bewildered. When Mordecai learned of all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the city, wailing loudly and bitterly. But he went only as far as the king's gate, because no one clothed in sackcloth was allowed to enter in. In every province to which the edict and order of the king came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Many lay in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's maids and eunuchs came and told her about Mordecai, she was in great distress. She sent clothes for him to put on instead of his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther summoned Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, assigned to attend to her, and ordered him to find out what was troubling Mordecai and why. So Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him everything that had happened to him, including the exact amount of money that Haman had proposed to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict for their annihilation, which had been published in Susa, to show to Esther and explain it to her. And he told him to urge her to go into the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. Hathach went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, "All of the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that he be put to death. The only exception to this is for the king to extend the gold scepter to him and spare his life. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king." When Esther's words reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer: Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to a royal position for such a time as this? Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day, and I and my maids will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. Now chapter 5. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall, facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her and held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Then the king asked, What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be given to you. If it pleases the king, replied Esther, let the king, together with Haman, come today to a banquet I have prepared for him. Bring Haman at once, the king said, so that we may do what Esther asks. So the king and Haman went to the banquet Esther prepared. As they were drinking wine, the king again asked Esther, Now what is your petition? It will be given you. And what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted. Esther replied, My petition and my request is this. If the king regards me with favor, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition to fulfill my request, then let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for them. Then I will answer the king's question. Haman went out that day happy and in high spirits. But when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate and observed that he neither rose nor showed fear in his presence, he was filled with rage against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. Calling together his friends and Zeresh his wife, Haman boasted to them about his vast wealth, his many sons, and all the ways the king had honored him, and how he had elevated him above the other nobles and officials. And that's not all, Haman added. I'm the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave, and she has invited me along with the king tomorrow. But all this gives me no satisfaction as long as I see that Jew, Mordecai, sitting at the king's gate. His wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, Have a gallows built 75 feet high, and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai hanged on it. Then go with the king to the dinner and be happy. This suggestion delighted Haman, and he had the gallows built. That night the king could not sleep, so naturally he ordered the book of the Chronicles, the record of his reign, to be brought in and read to him. It was found recorded there that Mordecai had exposed Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. What honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this? The king asked. Nothing has been done for him, his attendants answered. The king said, Who is in the court? Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the palace to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows he had erected for him. His attendants answered, Haman is standing in the court. Bring him in, the king ordered. When Haman entered, the king asked him, What should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Now Haman thought to himself, Who is there the king would rather honor than me? So he answered the king, For the man that the king delights to honor, have them bring a royal robe the king has worn, and a horse the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on its head. Then let the robe and the horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them robe the man the king delights to honor, and lead him on the horse through the city streets, proclaiming before him, This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. Go at once, the king commanded Haman. Get the robe and the horse and do just as you've suggested for Mordecai, the Jew who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything you have recommended. So Haman got the robe and the horse, and he robed Mordecai. And he led him on horseback to the city streets, proclaiming before him, This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. Afterward, Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman rushed home with his head covered in grief and told Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had happened to him. His advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, "Since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin." While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurried Haman away to the banquet Esther prepared. So the king and Haman went to dine with Queen Esther. And as they were drinking wine on the second day, the king again asked, "Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be granted." Then Queen Esther answered, "If I have found favor with you, O king, and if it pleases your majesty, grant me my life. This is my petition. And spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold for destruction and slaughter and annihilation. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king." King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, "Who is he? Where is the man who has dared to do such a thing?" Esther said, "The adversary and enemy is this vile Haman." That's right, you got the tone of it there, that's good. Then Haman was terrified before the king and the queen. The king got up in a rage, left his wine, and went out into the palace garden. But Haman, realizing the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, "Will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house?" As soon as the word had left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs attending the king, said, "A gallows 75 feet high stands by Haman's house. He had it made for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king." The king said, "Hang him on it." So they hanged Haman on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided. That same day, chapter 8, King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai came into the presence of the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and presented it to Mordecai. And Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. Esther again pleaded with the king, falling at his feet and weeping. She begged him to put an end to the evil plan of Haman, the Agagite, which he had devised against the Jews. Then the king extended the gold scepter to Esther, and she arose and stood before him. "If it pleases the king," she said, "and if he regards me with favor and thinks it the right thing to do, and if he is pleased with me, let an order be written overruling the dispatches that Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, devised, and wrote to destroy the Jews in all the king's provinces. For how can I bear to see disaster fall on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my family?" King Xerxes replied to Queen Esther and to Mordecai, the Jew, "Because Haman attacked the Jews, I have given his estate to Esther, and they have hanged them on the gallows. Now write another decree in the king's name in behalf of the Jews, as seems best to you, and seal it with the king's signet ring. For no document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked." At once the royal secretaries were summoned on the 23rd day of the third month, the month of Sivan. They wrote out all Mordecai's orders to the Jews and to the satraps, governors, and nobles of the 127 provinces stretching from India to Cush. These orders were written in the script of each province and language of each people, and also to the kings in their own script and language. Mordecai wrote in the name of King Xerxes, sealed the dispatches with the king's signet ring, and sent them by mounted couriers who rode fast horses especially bred for the king. The king's edict granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate any armed force of any nationality or province that might attack them and their women and children, and to plunder the property of their enemies. The day appointed for the Jews to do this in all the provinces of King Xerxes was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law at every province, and made known to the people of every nationality, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The couriers riding the royal horses raced out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict also was issued in the citadel of Susa. Mordecai left the king's presence wearing royal garments of blue and white, a large crown of gold and purple, and a robe of fine linen. And the city of Susa held a joyous celebration. For the Jews it was time of happiness and joy, gladness and honor. In every province and every city, wherever the edict of the king went, there was joy and gladness among the Jews, with feasting and celebrating, and many people of other nationalities became Jews, because fear of the Jews had seized them. Chapter 9. On the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, the edict commanded by the king was to be carried out. On this day the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, but now the tables are turned, and the Jews got the upper hand over those who hated them. The Jews assembled in their cities in all the provinces of the king Xerxes to attack those seeking their destruction. No one could stand against them, because the people of all the other nationalities were afraid of them. And all the nobles of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and the king's administrators helped the Jews, because fear of Mordecai had seized them. Mordecai was prominent in the palace. His reputation spread throughout the provinces, and he became more and more powerful. The Jews struck down all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying them, and they did what they pleased to those who hated them. In the citadel of Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. They also killed Parshandatha, Dalphon, Aspatha, Poratha, Adelia, Aridatha, Parmashtha, Erisai, Eridai, and Vizatha, the 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews. But they did not lay their hands on the plunder. The number of those slain in the citadel of Susa was reported to the king that same day. The king said to Queen Esther, "The Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men and the 10 sons of Haman in the citadel of Susa. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now what is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? It will also be granted." "If it pleases the king," Esther answered, "give the Jews in Susa permission to carry out this day's edict tomorrow also, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on gallows." So the king commanded that this be done. An edict was issued in Susa, and they hanged the 10 sons of Haman. The Jews in Susa came together on the 14th day of the month of Adar, and they put to death in Susa 300 men, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder. Meanwhile, the remainder of the Jews who were in the king's provinces also assembled to protect themselves and get relief from their enemies. They killed 75,000 of them, but did not lay their hands on the plunder. This happened on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th day they rested and made it a day of feasting and joy. The Jews in Susa, however, had assembled on the 13th and 14th, and then on the 15th they rested and made it a day of feasting and joy. That is why rural Jews, those living in villages, observe the 14th of the month of Adar as a day of joy and feasting, a day for giving presents to each other. Mordecai recorded these events, and he sent the letters to all the Jews throughout the provinces of King Xerxes, near and far, to have them celebrate annually the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar, as the time when the Jews got relief from their enemies, and as the month when their sorrow was turned into joy, and their mourning into a day of celebration. He wrote them to observe the days as days of feasting and joy, and giving presents of food to one another, and gifts to the poor. So the Jews agreed to continue the celebration they had begun, doing what Mordecai had written to them. For Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast the pur, that is the lot, for their ruin and destruction. But when the plot came to the king's attention, he issued written orders that the evil scheme Haman had devised against the Jews should come back on his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. Therefore these days were called Purim, from the word pur. Because of everything written in this letter, and because of what they had seen and what had happened to them, the Jews took it upon themselves to establish the custom that they and their descendants and all who join them should without fail observe these 2 days every year in the way prescribed and at the time appointed. These days should be remembered and observed in every city by every family, and in every province and in every city. And these days of Purim should never cease to be celebrated by the Jews, nor should the memory of them die out among their descendants. So Queen Esther, the daughter of Abihail, along with Mordecai, the Jew, wrote with full authority to confirm this second letter concerning Purim. And Mordecai sent letters to all the Jews in the 127 provinces of the king of Xerxes, words of goodwill and assurance, to establish these days of Purim at their designated times, as Mordecai, the Jew, and Queen Esther had decreed for them, and as they had established for themselves and their descendants in regard to their times of fasting and lamentation. Esther's decree confirmed these regulations about Purim, and it was written down in the records. King Xerxes imposed tribute throughout the empire to its distant shores, and all his acts of power and might, together with a full account of the greatness of Mordecai, to which the king had raised him, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Media and Persia? Mordecai, the Jew, was second in rank to King Xerxes, preeminent among the Jews, and held in high esteem by his many fellow Jews, because he worked for the good of his people and spoke up for the welfare of all the Jews. There you go. One more time for Haman. Yeah, and for Mordecai. There we go. All right, I think we got the spirit of the moment there. That's good. So I wanted to talk real quickly. And could somebody, by the way, go grab one Haman's pocket from the narthex so I can show it to the folks at home? And if you're in town, we might be able to deliver to you carry out after this today. I think Liz is getting that. Anyway, I wanted to talk, and this is a good thing to read the whole thing in one setting as it's traditionally read, because we kind of get a sense of the whole scope of it and the ebb and flow of it. So anything on the board behind me is fair game. Major impressions, what we learn from these characters about ourselves, the good, the bad, the hard, the encouraging. What do we know from the book of Esther? You want to show this? Here we go. We got the. This is what Haman's pockets look like here. This triangle-shaped. I'll show it to this video too, just in case. There you go.
What do I do?
You want to eat it? You want me to eat it?
Right, you eat it.
All right.
Everybody.
I read online that the part of the tradition was it was in the shape of a triangle because that was the shape of the hat that Haman wore.
There you go. It's a triangle shape in honor of Haman's hat. There you go. I didn't know that. Sounds good. It tastes good too. Any other questions or comments? Major impressions about Esther? Yes, Karen.
I think it's best not to wish evil on other people.
Best not to wish evil on other people. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You don't know what's coming back at you. That's great. That's great. Do unto others. There's a lot of that in Esther, isn't there? Yeah.
Well, your top thing, major impression of the book of Esther, even though God isn't specifically mentioned in the book of Esther, the implications of God is there and basically overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is identified.
Yeah. God is shouted as loudly as he can be without his name being mentioned. And some of the deliberate allusions that we think are in here to Daniel's story, the Joseph story, maybe to others, are calling to mind stories where we know it was Yahweh, God of Israel, that did the work. He's all over the place. And I think I mentioned this before. We sing that one song with the worship team. Even when I don't see it, you're working. And I think that's such an important teaching of Esther. What else do we have? Other thoughts or comments? Yes, Sandy.
I appreciate you highlighting how Esther matured in her leadership.
Mm-hmm. Esther matured in her leadership. She goes a long way from chapter 4 to don't you know what happens to the place in chapter 5 where, all right, here we go. Yeah, big deal. Other things that are on your mind after spending... What'd you say? The women are in charge, says Brad. And Liz cheers. That is one of the funny ironies of the book, because the end of chapter 1 there, chapter 1 is the most boring chapter as far as this little celebration is concerned, nothing to cheer or boo. But the concern in chapter 1 is, oh my goodness, the women are going to run things. And that's exactly what we have happening with Haman's wife, with her plans, and then certainly with Esther. Other comments, questions, impressions? Things that were challenging to you or encouraging to you in the study. Queen Vashti. Yeah, as far as this story is concerned, we don't know. Now, we talked earlier, possible connections between the story of Esther and the historical people of the kingdom of Persia. And Amystress was one of the queens of Xerxes, who eventually ticked him off to the point where she was basically banished as far as he was concerned. And then she's not mentioned again until she comes back on the scene in the days of their son, who becomes king. And so if Vashti is Amystress, which is speculative, of course, but if it is, then it's possible she comes back on the scene later. Of course, I can't prove that one way or the other, but that's part of the thinking. She certainly disappears from our story very quickly, after chapter 1.
Esther was really brave because
Yes.
she had no idea really what was gonna happen. I mean, she already knew that you don't go to the king
Yeah.
unless you're requested to come.
Right, right. Esther was very brave. She knew you didn't go to the king unless you requested to come. She's also very smart. I mean, the way she framed her questions was ingenious, and she basically got the king and Haman right where she wanted them, as far as that. And the invitation to come back to a second banquet is framed as if you're serious about giving me whatever I ask, then come back, and your very coming will be the clincher on that. Other impressions, takeaways from Esther. Yes, Tammy.
I have a section in my Bible talking about poetic justice
Mm-hmm.
throughout. And one of my favorites is Mordecai goes back to his old position after being honored. Haman wants more and more honor when he thinks he will be the honored hero.
Yes, yes.
Really shows their size.
The poetic justice of the honor being sought by Haman and not really sought by Mordecai, but he gets it. So this is another biblical teaching. You'll see it in the Proverbs and other places. But if you're pursuing honor, you probably won't get it. If you're doing things the right way, the honor will probably come. That's just kind of the way life works. And maybe even if it doesn't look like it's going to come, it looks like it's too late. It looks like it's all over. But it came just the same. So.
That same thing happened to a lot of soldiers that were honored in war.
Mm-hmm.
They did not seek it,
Right.
but it was bestowed upon them. They were more honored.
Yeah.
In a lot of World War II,
Yeah.
gallant people would not talk about it.
Right. A lot of military veterans throughout the years have done some very honorable things, not seeking their own honor, and therefore have been honored for it. And the people in the military who are all about their own honor are not at all regarded by everybody else in the military, right? So it's just the way it works. Yeah.
And it comes to mind the one, General Custer.
Yeah. There you go. Custer comes to mind.
Rewards.
Yeah.
But he always sought
Always sought his own honor. Yep.
Well, on the opposite side of that is the guy, I can't think of his name, but that was Hacksaw Ridge, who was the conscientious objector,
Okay.
but saved 70 or however many people by bringing them back and dragging them through the lines and doing all this stuff. Continued to try to save people by covering the hand grenade. He got himself blown up.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, he didn't do it for his glorification, but he was honored as a military hero.
Sure.
afterwards. So,
All the list of people could go on and on. People who were selflessly laying their lives down for somebody else and have been honored for it. And so it might be one of the ways here that really Esther is whispering Jesus in advance. We believe the whole Old Testament whispers Jesus in some sense, and it points to that way. The one who does not seek his own honor is the one who is glorified as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And those who do seek their own honor, like in that case, the Sanhedrin are the ones that come to nothing. Yes, Sandy.
I think bravery for doing what's right when Esther says, if I die, I die.
Yeah. If I die, I'm going to do the right thing. The bravery of that. Yes, John.
I think the story also shows that our actions have consequences,
Mm-hmm.
be they good or bad.
Yeah.
For Haman, they were bad. For Esther, they were good.
Yeah. Actions do have consequences, and they ultimately have to have a day of consequences, even if you have to wait for it, Yeah.
And they affect not just the person, they call it affects
Yeah.
other people.
It affects not just the person, but the whole community. And one of the whispers of Esther here is that the actions of a few have tremendous impact. And every time, something happens and the whole empire is alerted. And something else happens to the whole empire. So there's something to say for my own actions might have impact on others. Yes, Liz.
Kind of along with that, I was thinking, the story really shows a lot about anger, the reserves even obviously with Haman, but I think about John saying, Haman's anger at Mordecai ends up affecting the entire, and just the way that anger works and grows and how ego-driven it is,
Mhm.
and it's really a warning against,
Yeah.
that anger is raised so we can have our hearts.
Yeah. about anger, a warning about anger in Esther, and anger out of control. The king's anger out of control, Haman's anger out of control makes tremendous impact. And what we see with their anger, like you're saying, is the other character traits that go with the out of control anger. The tremendous pride, the tremendous insatiable appetite for more honor, more food, more women, more whatever. And that was certainly that's part of the anger thing. When you want a lot, you get angry a lot. It's kind of tied together. Right. 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 He wanted honor above all else. He got it from everybody except for one person, and that one person really, stuck in his craw, and here we go. Other questions, comments, impressions about Esther as a whole?
This is another story, and I think there's many in the Old Testament, where when you don't do exactly what God has called you to do the right way and in its entirety, there are consequences
Yeah.
that will eventually come to pass.
Yeah. When you don't do God's will, God's way, there are consequences that will come around. And especially when you're overtly doing your own will, your own way, that will come back to get you. That's right. Yes. Other questions or comments? Bill?
When I read the scripture, I always think, what is that saying to us today?
Mm-hmm.
And when we look at the world around us, we see many different people that are coming against the Jews, coming against Christians, killing people throughout the world out of hate. And you wonder what type of judgment God will place upon those individuals because of all this, because we see God's judgment and God's hand working in the Old Testament in many different areas. And so what is God going to do to those people today? And the only hope they have is for us to speak Jesus Christ to them, that Jesus Christ would come and change their hearts and their lives.
Yeah. Everyone needs what we ultimately need, which is the Lord to come in and change our hearts and our lives and lead us in a new direction. There's the good news repeated, throughout the Bible, here in Esther as well, that God will judge unrepentant evil, and he will vindicate his people, and it is coming. And yet God doesn't take pleasure in that destruction, so he invites this repentance, aggressively, and that we'd be a part of drawing people to that. You mentioned, what does it have to say to us today? That is one of the questions about Esther, really a two-part question. Does Esther have relevance for Christians today? And if it does, why does it? Why is it important for us today, if it is important? What is Esther? How does it connect with Christians today?
I think just as today that more and more people are trying to eliminate God,
Mhm.
his name,
Mhm.
his word, and everything spoken about him, to show us he's still there.
Yes. So even as all these against God forces around us in our society and our world, God is still there, even when we don't see his name right here in Esther, but he's still working, and he will, in fact, bring things to a good resolution. We have to wait for it. Other thoughts about that, the importance of Esther for Christians or anything else? Yes.
What's the Bible verse? God will make a way where there seems to be no way.
Well, that's a song. Yeah,
But isn't
yeah.
that,
There are, I'm thinking of a passage in Isaiah where he'll open a wide open space for you.
But it just reminds me of the persecuted church.
Yes, persecuted church, yeah.
And, look at the Nigerians. There's been thousands, and of course, hopefully, there's going to be some help for those people. Of course, there's a lot of already been killed, but
Right.
it's like it's just unfathomable that someone just continues seeking God when they know them, their children.
Right.
We've never even experienced anything close to that.
Right. Sherry has mentioned the persecuted church, and I thought about them. Obviously I'm gearing up for today and for Sunday at the same time and thinking about this. But, this is, the Jews obviously historically are persecuted people. Well, we know that. And so this is meaning to them for that reason. But we have followers of Jesus that are obviously a persecuted people around many places around the world, throughout Christian history. And so to have this kind of word that the Lord is going to vindicate you is a big deal. Yes, Liz.
Another thing, how does Esther speak today or Christians today? I think about Tiffany, how
So,
I just think she's a neat role model for women, for girls, for everybody.
so really 2 layers of your comment there. The one is that she was talking about Tiffany just instinctively likes reading biographies about women who have done great things in history, and that's an encouragement to her. And so Esther is the story of this woman who's tremendously courageous and brave and wise in the Old Testament, and an important story for women of faith even today to be encouraged by her example. It's interesting. I don't believe that Esther is mentioned in the New Testament, but certainly many other women are who are used by God in courageous ways. And that's not like a brand new thing God does it reluctantly. Oh, I guess I'll have to use the women. Like, there's all these examples throughout history of God using these faithful women, unexpected cases, to be his instruments. And so that's encouraging. But you also mentioned her willingness to surrender to death. If I perish, I perish. I'm going to do the right thing. As mentioned a couple different times here today. And I think about Paul's saying, I've been crucified with Christ. It's no longer that I who live, but Christ who lives in me. You know, you died. Your life is hidden with Christ in God. There's a sense in which following Jesus is deny myself, take up my cross, follow daily. So these persecuted Christians you're talking about are already willing to take these great risks because they've already made the decision. I belong to Jesus no matter what. And here we go. And the courage that comes from that. I've surrendered myself to the Lord. I trust him for the outcome. I'm going to do whatever has to happen, no matter how risky it is, and deal with whatever has to happen because I'm surrendered to him. And so there's a surrender of faith in Esther as well. Faith in Yahweh, the God of Israel, even though it doesn't say that explicitly, that's what she is. A great example of that, yes. Other thoughts about Esther? Don't be shy now. Something you've been hanging on to for 16 Wednesdays. He said, I just have to express this about Esther. I think everybody wants to eat pastries, what they want to do. So, anything else?
Just that Esther was so brave.
Mm-hmm.
Decide to go before the king.
Yeah.
Just, not knowing what was going to happen.
Yeah, so brave. It's interesting, even though the fun reading of this is the cheering and booing for Mordecai and Haman. But Esther is our real heroine in the story, and we know it, And even though the text ends with all this emphasis on Mordecai, chapter 9, chapter 10, Esther is the one that really, is the instrument of God to really make things. I mean, Mordecai was too, of course, but her bravery seems to come to the top, just the impressions we're sharing today. I don't think anything else. Anything you feel called to respond to the reading of Esther? Something the Holy Spirit has laid on your heart. I need to respond in this way to what the Lord has done in Esther. Yes, Tammy.
Because she used her influence to help others.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't use it to raise herself up.
Yes.
But to help others. And we all have a sphere of influence in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
And where we can reach out to people in our families or in our neighborhood to help them.
Sure.
Esther came from a really humble beginning. She was an orphan.
Yeah.
And was raised up, but she didn't go to her
Yeah.
dad or anything.
Yeah.
She still humbled herself and helped others.
That's a great point. So you're talking about Esther used her sphere of influence to be for the benefit of others, to the glory of God. And really that's what's emphasized about Mordecai down there at the end. Why are we revering this guy? Because he looked out for the dignity of others. And so the Lord has given each of us the opportunity to glorify him by being a blessing to those that are around us. That was even the theme of the prayer time on Sunday for the church in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. We were praying particularly those that have the ministry of presence, of just being there for those around them. And we have that calling as well today. And Esther, bringing up the part, she came from orphan, she becomes queen, but it doesn't go to her head. That's a great point of view. Yes, Liz.
Along with that, there's a author, Anne she talks about our generation is the Esther generation, like at least in American Christianity, like we have all this wealth, we have, like we have almost anything we could want. Like here she is in this palace, she's got servants, she's got, all, and so she talks about kind of the same thing Tammy was saying, like how are we going to use that? We're just going to live as queens in our own little roles, or are we going to use what we've been given to bless others?
So Liz is saying, one of her favorite authors is saying that we're like Esther in the sense we have a tremendous amount of wealth, influence, opportunity. I mean, just in our culture, we have a lot of resources to us, and how we're going to use those things to be a blessing to others. Yeah.
Samaritan's Purse is what this kind of reminds me because they show up wherever there's a problem, be it wars or devastation or whatever. They bring people, and people volunteer, but at the end of their always, and they pray as well, but during that time, when they leave, they give everybody that works on a particular job signs a Bible. And so they give them the Bible. So it's not that these people think, oh, these people are just good people wanting to come and help us. It's definitely promoting God, and, we're here because of God and because we care and we want you to be
Yeah.
one of God's people.
A Samaritan's Purse as a good example of that kind of ministry. The hands and feet help, and then also the Bibles they provide as well. If you're sneaking out early, you're welcome to grab a Haman's pocket back there. One more comment. Anybody have a last thing they want to get off their chest, or have we exhausted? Yes, Jeff.
Overall, the reward of putting others before self.
The reward of putting others before self. Yeah. The tremendous, satisfying, at the end of the day reward. Selfish might feel good for a short while, but the enduringly satisfying thing is taking the risks to the glory of God to put others before myself and that kind of thing. Yeah. Well, I want to thank everybody for this. Esther's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it. All of these sessions will be on, I've got them on YouTube, on my channel, and those are linked to the top of our church Facebook page. I've also finished putting Revelation on YouTube now, and that's also linked to the church's Facebook page, so you can go back and watch all of those episodes if you want. How to Study the Bible is also there, and I'll just keep putting them on from this point forward to preserve them until the internet changes and something else becomes a better place to do that. So let's pray, and then we're going to go out to the narthex and eat Haman's pockets. A great time. Let's pray together. Lord, we thank you for this beautiful and funny and joyful and challenging and rich story of Esther. We thank you for what you've been doing in our hearts. I pray you'd cleanse us of our anger, our pride, our greed for honor and for stuff. I pray you'd help us to be full of a heart for you and for others, and to use our spheres of influence to your glory. I pray that we would learn from Haman and from Xerxes, that we would search our hearts out and ask you to show us what is like them and us. And I pray that we would also learn from Esther and Mordecai, that we might seek whatever is of you in them, that would be also by your Spirit in us. Pray your blessing now as we have some fellowship time together outside, and we thank you for your love and your goodness to us. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, I'll say goodbye. We'll be back this next week for, I think, 2 John, or maybe some other surprise. Stay tuned next Wednesday at 9 a.m. Bye.